accomplished one of the main achievements that we take credit for, even though he did it. And his name is Stephen Walsh. He's going to be introduced in just a moment by Lucille. Stephen got the teachers union to sign on and support Kucinich's NEED Act. There's a document in your kit which is their resolution. Please read that. And he did it pretty much himself. He's going to tell us how he did it, because this is something that we'd like to repeat around the country. And we're presently working on doing that in some places. So, first of all, Lucille's going to introduce Steve.
Okay. So besides everything on my paper, I have to say I have a personal honor in introducing Stephen Walsh, because he is responsible for my connection with AMI. Back in the first AMI meeting, Stephen is a Quaker, and I was part of a sustainability study group in my university town, and some fellow Quakers in that group said, hey, I think there's something going on in Chicago that would interest you, because they knew my interest in monetary reform. And so I'm here because Stephen was connected to AMI. I also am honored to introduce him because he's a fellow educator, and I'm an educator of educators and of educational leaders at a state university in New York. Stephen has been a public school teacher, an observer of educational systems, a curriculum writer, and a specialist in construction. He worked for 35 years in various schools and districts in Alaska and the Chicago Public Schools. He officially retired in June, and he says that lasted about 2 days. And he was called by the Golden Apple Foundation, which is a wonderful foundation that works with high school students who are interested in going into education and encouraging them, resourcing them over 4 years in college to work in high-need urban schools, an area that is very close and dear to my heart. And he serves in that capacity, doing work for them, coaching Chicago Public Schools in teachers in science education. And besides all of that, he's been active in AMI and the NEED Act since the beginning, including, as Stephen already said, in working with the Chicago Teachers Union, in educating them about the NEED Act, and in actually playing a crucial role in their endorsement of the NEED Act, which is what he is going to share with us today. So please join me in welcoming Steve.
Good morning, everybody. With all of this gear on, I feel like I know what it must be like to go to certain places in Syria or other places. I feel loaded up electronically. Anyhow, I wanted to make several comments and to go over things in education and in the topic Stephen has given me relative to past, present, and future, if we could. And yesterday, we learned about the about education and maybe the push or the privatization of education, when we were finding kids getting pushed, round kids being pushed into square pegs. Was that how you just said it, Howard? Okay, and I want to give you a little more flavor of that historically and where we're coming from. So when you think about education, you'll have a rich, or maybe a little richer context to do that in. And right after that, I'll get into the present, where I'll give considerable time, and we can maybe get into a dialogue of how to work with educators and how people can help with this process. And then we can think of the future of, if we have time in the schedule, about how would you bring the AMI into the classroom more so. So in going over education for a moment is what's happening today with charter schools and whatnot is we often find round kids being pushed into square holes. And where does that come from? And educators have been there before. So let's go over that just for a minute. And what's going on is that in history, we start off with the colonial period and the present period, and we have a little debate going on. It's usually between the Yankee North and the Jacksonian Free Democracy, or the Jacksonian Democrats South, and it's about values, it's about culture, and it's called the tribal model of education. It's where you're really concerned about values, and you want them to have your values, okay? Then we get into an era of maybe cotton gin thinking, and Michael pointed out the technology, and that's when we get to what's considered the factory model of education, where indeed we're beginning to push round kids into square holes. We think of them as coming to down the assembly line, and the push in the mid-1800s is you need so many kids to be managers and leaders, you need so many kids to go back onto the farm, you need so many kids to be factory workers, what's the education level we need for these, and we'll get the process going. Later in the 1800s, you have what we could call the hospital model. And that is, kids aren't fitting into the factory, how are we going to deal with them? And so we work with individual children and we make education right for the individual child. And it comes out of John Dewey and other people's thinking. The 20th century has had a blend of a number of things going on. Early in the Reagan period, in the late 70s, we're in our budget crunches, et cetera. And budget crunches have really been killing public education step by step by step. From the 70s, late 70s, after the Great Society, Johnson's Great Society program, after that, there's just a nibbling away, and that nibbling begins to increase in the late 1990s. It's staff, it's budgets, it's either the music or the art teacher. It's, in the case of Chicago, getting 80% exemption from PE. Instead of teaching PE 40 minutes once a day for every child, you now only have to have one PE class a week for a child. And I've been in schools where kids got no PE at all the whole year. And you can save a lot of money on your PE teachers that way. And we could go on. You can lose the aides, you can lose more special services. So we need to look at this in a context a little bit. So that's the situation. Going back to Ronald Reagan in that period, is things were getting tough on education. The philosophy was changing from to Ronald Reagan, but it was the special education parents that stood up and argued in the courts. And they brought back actually the hospital model, thinking we have to take care of our special ed children. Public law, I'm forgetting the number, 181, 192, something like this, I think around 1981. And that really keeps the progressive nature of education going in a healthy direction. Even though we're taking budgetary losses, we're winning somewhere else for our children. Okay, and I've witnessed in the 90s and the 2000s education budgets being cut back and public education really hurting. Okay. And I'm going to, and it's because of this in the early 2000s that in Chicago you have Karen Lewis, Jackson Potter, Jesse Sharp, and a number of great people who are feeling this, but they can't explain it, but they're coming together on Sunday nights for about a year or two, just meeting and thinking about things and having study groups on lots of various issues. And a wonderful fellow, this guy Jackson Potter, he's one of the CTU leaders. He says, in regard to privatization, it was like a train coming down the tracks. It was so small in the distance. few years later, it was hitting him, and it was bigger than ever, and it was just passing them by, and they've been blown away. And where does that come from? Well, Michael Milken, well, we learned yesterday, and we know where it's coming from. It comes from these budget cuts. It comes from the need for growth in economies. And where can they expand? And Michael Hudson and Michael Milken, two very different fellows, but talk about it in terms of wealth creation and in the process we're in now, in that Michael Milken was pushing the idea we've got to build up collateral, because when you have new collateral, you collateralize things, that's wealth creation. And we could talk about this in education relative to Pearson and some of the corporations and how they're doing wealth creation using in an area where they weren't into before, the public sector in education. Or we can talk about charter schools coming into education, and how does that get dealt with? And I'm going to read this. This is Education Inc. Inc. is the response back, and this is what's happening, and this comes from parents, not even teachers. Brian Malone was a documentary filmmaker and a parent of 2 public school children in Douglas County, Colorado. Douglas County Schools has gotten a lot of national attention because of its controversial educational reforms. The neoliberals took it over. When Malone noticed several hundred people protesting in front of the school administration building, he started asking questions of his public school board leaders, and that's when things got ugly. Brian Malone discovers the hidden sources behind the dramatic changes in American public education, not just in Colorado, but across the nation. Learn how, under the guise of education reform, politicians, hedge fund investors, billionaires, and giant corporations are changing American public education from a civic institution to a profit center. One fellow in here talks about it. He's an investor, and he says, gee, education is a growth industry, and we need a lot more growth. We're getting 12 to 14% returns in this area. Fair and equal access to a free and public education has been a foundation of American freedom for more than a century. Follow Moore as he travels from Colorado to Chicago, Washington, D.C., New York, Wisconsin, East Los Angeles, to uncover how free market education reformers are redefining that freedom for only those who can afford it. And there's wonderful, as I think it was Howie and somebody else who talked yesterday about teachers breaking rules and defending their kids. In here you have a superintendent. The New York case is a superintendent near New York City, and he's telling his teachers to hell with the assessments, teach your students. And he's looking at chemistry students and difficult concepts in AP classes, and those teachers are reaching them with interesting Socratic questions, engaging with a lot of interesting curriculum and hands-on stuff and hands-on thinking, and they're not to worry about their grades. So there are some people fighting. There's ways of doing it different, and so that's what CORE and the CTU leadership has been about. And so anyhow, I wanted to give you some context if you have thoughts, but I want you to be able to talk to educators and think about public education, and you may have some questions about this. So Milken talks about the need for collateralization. He was talking about the need to go after natural resources in the public sector everywhere. It's third world countries. And Friedman talked about how this increases your wealth, actually. But this is a dying economy, as we've talked about, where we don't have a strong growth. We would actually need another Earth going around the sun that we could colonize to have strong growth at this point. Okay, enough. So education in the present. So I came to the CTO meetings with the AMI agenda right when Karen Lewis took office. And they've been meeting every Sunday. And now they just took over the leadership of the teachers union. And I told them I wanted them to support Kucinich's bill, 290 at the time, 2990. And Karen responded back, well, we need to have a study group. That's how we're working. We've really got to study and then learn it. So they put me in a study group, and I had some middle-level teachers and educators who were willing to devote extra time beyond their teaching to come and meet, and we would talk about it. Sometimes it'd be before, after, or during core meetings. And core is the leadership group within the CTU that's running the show today. And we feel like she's really hit the nail, or Karen and others have really hit the nail on the head, being connected to communities and parents. And we've done that a lot better than the Board of Ed has, and that has allowed actually the Union for Great Success in Chicago. So we're doing a study group, and nothing is being pushing, but I'm just working with them, and I'm only one person. And I've gone to a few other places, and I'll get to that in a minute. So, but I did that for like a year and 3 months. And it's now the end of 2011. 2012 is coming up, and Kucinich is being contested in the primary, and he may be losing to Nancy in the redistricting that the Republican Ohioans did. So we may be losing Dennis. How can we support him? We need him. So one of the things I could do was get an endorsement from CTU. So I had done my groundwork. I was a constituent, and I talked to Karen and I said, this is what's happening over in Ohio. We really need Dennis Kucinich. Can we now seriously take a look at it? Can we bring this to the executive board? And bless Karen Lewis. I worked with her November, the whole month of December. She was away on vacation in Hawaii, and we would get on the phone 2 or 3 times while she was on vacation talking about it. And so January 11th, and I didn't write one word of it, what's in your packet is all of the executive board and the study group's writing that I've been able to infiltrate. I didn't write one word of it. They wrote all the whereas and therefores in it. And that came off January 7th. So it gave them exactly 2 months to help Dennis with his re-election. As it didn't work, and so then we got to learn as we go. During that time, I started contacting Cleveland and Toledo. They made a funny district, even though those are like, I don't know, 100 miles, 80 miles apart, those 2 cities. They made Dennis's district and Nancy Cantor's district Toledo, and then had a thin little patch that when it goes up to Lake Erie, goes across Lake Erie and comes down into Cleveland. And the Republicans figure, one of them has to lose. We're going to get rid of half of our liberals in Ohio. And in some ways they got Nancy and we lost Dennis, so you know the story.
I think that was in the next primary. Your paper was there, the Chicago Teachers Union endorsement was there for one of the primaries.
Yeah, for that primary.
No, it was for one that Dennis won.
No.
You
no,
sure?
Yeah, I'm positive. It's
Okay.
the 2012. We're in January right now of 2012, and I turned around and tried to build on the teachers union and what was going on right away, and I contacted AFT. And we learned some lessons about what works and doesn't work. I didn't have time for study groups in Toledo or Cleveland. I was teaching in Chicago, and I was doing all of this, runaround time, after school type of stuff. So recently, You may remember, if you've been here a few years, remember Jules? And anybody remember Carol Breuer? Yeah, so we have some wonderful Green Party people. And Carol Breuer ran for congressman in the Green Party from Palo Alto, California, and her son, Jules, was the campaign manager. And Jules' was here as an intern for Stephen for a full year and was active a little before and after. Jules has been becoming a new teacher. He's under tremendous pressure, some of it unfair and needlessly being put under pressure. And as a new teacher, he needs to be supported. In Ontario, Canada, they give new teachers 4 years of support to make sure they can be successful. In the United States, we put them in the deepest part of the pool or the lake and see if they can get to shore or something. It's just a tough situation. I feel sorry for new teachers, and I've been there too, and I can talk to you. I was put in the projects of Chicago in a very tough neighborhood with lots of drugs going on, and it wasn't an easy time for me at all. It's not the way we should be bringing education. I survived. Both my parents were Chicago public school educators, and I came at it more as an anthropologist. I lived in Alaska 10 years focusing on education. I've traveled to Mexico, El Salvador, Iceland, Sweden, France, personally studying public education. I have an anthropology background doing it. And so it touches a chord with me, and I went through it a little bit too in terms of the toughness of it. Okay, so now we want to go out this summer. I contacted Carol, and to make it work, this is what it takes now to make it work, to work with unions. And this is the heart of what Stephen wants me to get to finally, is that this summer, Jules and I went to the San Francisco United Teachers Union. It's 30,000 strong teachers thereabout, and I think that includes some other staff in the building. We also went to the San Francisco Community College Teachers Union that's a 1,200 membership. The San Francisco body, Linda Blanc is the new Karen Lewis. She just came in. She's a rabble-rouser, and the teachers elected their strongest person to fight to buck the system. And they're learning their lessons from actually the Chicago Teachers Union, and that's what they told me. I went in there. I didn't have a lot of time, and she didn't have time. Lita Blanc wasn't going to have time to see me. She found out I had Jules with me, one of her young teachers, and that was my passport to get in to see her. And so we went in, and she gave us 5-10 minutes. She was in the middle of a meeting. She comes out of the meeting, or she adjourns it for a little bit, and we meet in her office for a little bit. And she's in the middle of a struggle, much like Karen. Karen working in the Mexican-American neighborhood of Pilsen early on, and they wanted to destroy a garden and a nature center over there. The parents wanted it, the school district wanted it gone, and they fought. There was one of the pitched battles. There's pitched battles going on all the time around Chicago. San Francisco had its pitched battle, and it was homeless and people in San Francisco housing, and the union decided they had to be involved with the communities there, and they were planning their strategies for it. She gives me her time, says, I'm learning this. She accepted all of our material, and she's going to need Jules as the person, the boots on the ground to get it done, to do the work. After that meeting, we went over to the San Francisco Community College Union across town. We met with them, and we brought one of their students who Carol knew in her activism, Bob Garin or something like that. I'm not getting his last name right. But Bob is a student at the community college, is a retired person, a postal service union person, and he caught on immediately. He understood the message right away. And he had been influenced by Carol, obviously, about monetary thinking too. And so we had him. And he's then the boots on the ground now for working with the San Francisco Community College. So and what was interesting, there was a difference between them. The San Francisco Community College system today is being attacked. All colleges have to go through accreditation processes that are endless. And they were working to on-credit the San Francisco Community College system. And that college and those teachers were in the fight for their lives. They are right now. And so in spite of that, their community organizer met with Bob, Jules, and myself. And Bob represents boots on the ground. He's knowledgeable, he's got it, and he's ready to push, keep hammering away, nudging the system, nudge, 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 nudge. He's got a local expert right behind him whenever he needs him, that's Jules, who can't be there all the time, but if he needs some expertise or help, he's got backup. And then Jules used me as backup, like I'm a core. You know, Karen Lewis has a lot of cachet across the country, so, and I'm a part of her group, so I get that cachet by by her tail coat or whatever. So I get an audience too, and so that's the struggle with the unions over there. But again, it's boots on the ground, somebody who can continuously nudge. What happened is the political organizer took our information, said, yes, I understand that we're in a death struggle, but we know the banking system and the monetary system, there's a deep connection, and we got to strike it. And if the teachers union did this, even though we're in our death knell, we're going to do it too. So we got a real strong supporter there. 4 minutes?
Sure. But you're at a good point to stop now. This is terrific.
No, I got my, come on, I didn't even get to the future. But, good old Steve. Keen, I got to digest that again, and it's food for thought, but I think he cut into my time. Okay, so, Athenia is her name over at the junior college system, says, yeah, let's push it forward. So we've got Bob, who's the nudger and the backup, and so we're quite hopeful there. But even though they're under desperate circumstances, somebody has time to think a larger picture and look at the outside environment. You tend to get narrowed in telescopic thinking, but you got to still look at the larger environment. And usually there's people around you can find who will listen to you, who can take that those perceptions. And CTU is doing that. They've listened to a lot on money.
Chicago teachers, you let them.
Yeah, they're
Chicago
even going
Teachers
further
Union.
and thinking about it. They're looking at, sorry to say, public banking. They're looking at, maybe we could have a Chicago dollar right now when Karen was running for president. They're looking at all of the ideas. They're looking at survival locally. So you got to look at everything. Sort of what Nick's bringing up in his point was, we got to look at an international currency. We're part of that conversation. And I wrote a paper. I've written a number of papers, long papers, and I've passed it out to the union and to all of the leadership there about, Ellen Brown's lead, Graco's thing on currency, on local currency, the whole thing. And I've laid out in great detail so they had the best knowledge possible and a fair presentation. But when push came to shove, they're with us here, and they're happy to be here. So, that's that. I wanted to get a word in on the future. Can I have 1 minute, Steve?
Of course you can have.
Thanks. Samuel, raise your hand, Samuel. Samuel is pushing monetary curriculum in the schools. and he and I can actually use your help. We're looking for, how do you bring these ideas into the classroom? And Samuel's got a model of, if he's got, somewhere between 20 and 40 kids, he can get them working in teams, reviewing political, monetary, or economies in his system. I would have them reviewing monetary systems, but we're working together on how we can overlap our gaming thinking. So this is how it can be. I'm writing like 3 or 4 curriculums right now. One curriculum deals with the present system and some alternatives. And one of my case studies is Iceland. Yamaguchi brought up a few more. He said Dutch, you can look at it. We can look at its Japanese Money Act or Monetary Act. And there's a few more out there. What's going on in UK, the positive monies introduction into Parliament. So we can dissect those. And what's wonderful about being a teacher facilitator, I don't have to be, I want to give them all really good information, fair information, but I don't have to answer all the questions. I'm setting up a Socratic dialogue, and I'm trying to ask questions that hook the students in. And I talk about gaming, because kids are into gaming, and it's a nice language, but all I'm really doing is hooking the kids into the conversation. So I give them the rules of the present system. Money needs to be a medium. When you set up your monetary system, you may not want too much or too little. Basic rules, and then as we go through the present system, they get it. And now they're the advisor to Iceland. How would you advise the Icelandic people? And we have that 100-page report. We can do that, and that helps create a curriculum for their thinking, and they can review it, and they can make their presentations. And we'll find that those students are going to be leaders in the future. Thank you.
I'm not a terrorist.
Thank you, Steve, very much. That was excellent. And he succeeded in getting that teachers union to endorse the NEED Act. It's one of 3 endorsements, only 3, should be hundreds, endorsements that the NEED Act got. And you can see them, they're clipped together in your kit. Steve is right. Teachers are under attack across the country, everywhere, for the same reasons, that the financial people want to take that over as a profit center. And some of you want to look at the bankers in a nice way, in a friendly way. I can't. I just can't. If they're unaware of these things that are going on, they're a real danger to society, and of the bad part that they're playing in it. So I'm going to keep my present attitude about bankers until we see them doing something nice and good. And there might be 1 or 2 of them out of the thousands that are doing that. Our next